Why is it called the passwords?
That is the name that the state gave it. That's the best answer I can give. I honestly don't know.
So it's a quiz, correct?
Yeah, it's a quiz, yeah.
Okay.
It's required by a new state law that came into effect this time last year. So. And your other teachers now are supposed to be doing it. Of course, you hear all kinds of things. I've heard stat students, the other teachers aren't doing it. Well, if they aren't, I am. Yeah.
I was looking at the study guide, it has nothing to do with the
That's what?
Like the study guide for the past has nothing to do with what we do in the class.
Has nothing to do with what we do in the class? Well, again, the reason for that is the first history pass is supposed to be primary sources and secondary, and I'm using a study guide that was given to me by another teacher. But it does have everything to do with primary sources and secondary sources, and not to do with ancient history. That is true, nothing to do with ancient history. But now there will be 10 questions, some of them will have something to do with ancient history. But it's not about history so much, folks, as it is about, can you tell the difference between a primary source and a secondary source? Now diaries are mostly what? Primary sources. The Diary of Anne Frank, primary sources. Now, yeah, I'll say this. About the Civil War. Some Southern historians do not want to admit that they had fought a 4-year war to keep slavery. So they tried to change history a little bit and make it seem like that the war was fought over states' rights, which would have made their cause more justifiable. But then historians on both sides got to looking at the journals of the men who fought it and the newspapers from that time period, and they came to the conclusion that the war was actually, for the most part, over slavery. The men were not fighting on each side for states' rights. Both sides were fighting over slavery. And again, they came to that conclusion by studying original sources. In other words, sources that dated from the period 1861 to 1865. All right. No, that's one example. Again, it has nothing to do with the world. Oh yeah, if you have one of those, I'll take it now. Contract. All right, any other questions? Yeah, at least one of you did look up the past, and it's true, it has nothing there about ancient history. But the past does have to, it's a state requirement that I try to teach the difference between primary and secondary, yes.
Some teachers make the past exam a quiz grade.
Oh yes, it is required, and it counts at least 5% of your total grade. Well, I counted more like 14% of the total grade. So yes, it does in fact count. I have the formula I use on the syllabus. Yes, it does count toward your grade. So it is important that you try to do well on it. All right. Now, any other questions, issues, comments? Okay, now this thing I say about no scantron, that only applies to the first couple of tests. It does not apply to every test, but it does apply to the first couple of tests. All right. Before I proceed, is Ian Grattan here? Ian Grattan. All right. All right, I'll move on. I'll call roll in about 30 or so minutes. And if you're wondering about my computer, I'm uploading this morning's lecture onto YouTube so that I can put it on iCollege. And that takes time. My main computer is in a repair shop, so I'm using a substitute computer that's half as fast as the others. So don't expect to see today's lecture on iCollege till sometime tomorrow afternoon. I mean, I have orchestra rehearsal at night, a dental appointment in the morning, and it takes me about 4 hours to convert my video to MP4. And I can do it while asleep, but still, that's 4 hours. Yes?
What do you play?
Trumpet. Yeah, I've played the trumpet for almost 50 years. When I was a teenager, got to the level I am now, I never did advance. I mean, I tried. I mean, a lot of this stuff is natural ability, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to go beyond your natural. Some people disagree with that, but you can't go beyond your natural abilities. And I have trouble with anything that with a keyboard, whether it's a typewriter, piano. I have to think about what I'm doing before I do it. That's a no-no. You have to just do it without thinking. So I mean, I tried on the piano keyboard. I can play a little bit, but it's tough. Anyway, enough of that. That's enough for me. All right. Any other questions about the lesson, about the test? Okay. We left off last time with Persia. All right. The religion of the Persians was Zoroastrianism, and like the religion of Egypt, and like the religion of the Jews, the religion of Zoroaster had a little bit to do with morals. The Greek religion did not, the Sumerian religion hardly did, but Egypt, they expected good morality in order to have a happy afterlife. The Jews also did, and the Zoroastrians, basically here's what Zoroaster taught. He taught that there was a constant war between good and evil. And good and evil were so evenly balanced that it was going to be very difficult for either side to win over the other. But it was our duty while we were alive to make sure that we took the side of the good, to help the good win, and eventually, at the end of history, good would finally triumph over evil, and those who had fought on the side of the good would be rewarded for their work. Now, in a lot of ways, it sounds like fundamental Christianity and Judaism, but there was one major difference, folks. And again, if I sound opinionated, I'm not going to apologize for it, but not in this case anyway. Zoroaster believed that once you had taken the side of evil, you could never, ever become good again. I would say he almost got it right. Persons who fall into bad habits, it's been estimated to have only one chance in 20 of recovery. However, I'm not going to stand up here and say a person cannot recover. It's tough, it's difficult, but I'm going to say it can be done by a person who's determined. Now, Zoroaster said it couldn't, and he almost got it right. Now, as for Zoroaster's personal life, we used to say, historians say he lived around the year 600 BCE. Now, some recent historians have put him back to the year 1000 BCE. But as is the case of some other of these figures, these men of history, there are even persons who doubt that he ever even existed at all. Of course, some persons will say that Jesus Christ never existed. We have more proof of his existence than we have of the existence of Julius Caesar, of Caesar Augustus, of Nero, of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and a whole bunch of them combined. But nevertheless, there have been persons who have said that. The Persians had no doubt that he existed. The question that comes back to us, so is when did he live? And well, we pretty well know what he taught. Persian boys were taught to handle the lance, warfare, and speak the truth. Again, taught morality. Not that any one of us always does, but nevertheless, they were taught to speak the truth. Now, the Zoroaster, Persia is Iran, as I mentioned before. Zoroastrianism simply could not hold up when Christianity came in and took over. And then came Islam. And Zoroaster's followers were driven into India, where they live on the western shores of India's coastline. And some of them have accumulated a great deal of wealth, owing to the fact that they tend to live a monastic life and a peaceful life and accumulate their wealth over hundreds of years. So they are quite wealthy, and they look forward to the day when they can safely, comfortably go back to Iran, their original homeland, and set up shop in Iran again, but that remains to be seen if that will ever happen during our lifetime. Iran is very much entrenched right now. Anyway, Zoroaster, the religion that spread over the empire. Now, there has been scholars who would say that because the Israelis, when Nebuchadnezzar carried them captive, Nebuchadnezzar had married the Persian king's daughter, and some of the captives found their way over here into Persia. And some people say that that the Persians influenced the Jewish teaching. Others say that the Jews influenced the Persian teaching. Persons who wonder why Cyrus the Great was so kind and benevolent will say that it was because of Zoroastrianism, that Zoroaster taught him to be that way, and that Cyrus was trying to take the side of the good. And he was very lenient toward the people that the Assyrians and Babylonians had conquered. And as a result, he didn't have to fight a whole lot of wars, but he did have to conquer. All right, here's one reason, folks. This may sound strange, but I mean, he was one of the mightiest conquerors of all time. But at home in his palace, he was henpecked. His wife controlled him. His wife told him, conquer, get out. You have the most powerful nation on earth. You need to get out and conquer. And according to the accounts, he did. He conquered Egypt. Well, actually, his son conquered Egypt. But he built up an empire that was to extend from India all the way to Ethiopia. He did not himself get Egypt, but his son did. But he had this region here. The biggest of all the ancient empires were studied. All right, so speaking of empires, I think I ought to give these to you in some kind of chronological order. First one was Sumer. That one didn't become very large. Next was Sargon. Then came Babylon under Hammurabi. Then came Assyria. Then there came a decline where there was a big gap where there were no empires. This was when the nation of Israel was formed during the time. Then the empires revived again. First Assyria. Then Babylon. Babylon, the chief ruler was Nebuchadnezzar. And then after Babylon, Babylon gave way to Persia. Now we're going to study in the next few chapters how that Persia gave way to Alexander. And then Alexander's Greek Empire gave way to Rome. These empires used to be called world empires. If that term is used anymore, I haven't seen it. It's because they conquered so much of the known world. Again, I don't think historians want to use that term anymore because the world empire would include the whole world and not just the known part of it. These empires, now you may notice, Babylon rose and fell, then rose again. And there are persons who say that actually Babylon rose right here after Sargon. Babylon rose under Nimrod and fell, but that's legend. It rose and fell, rose again and fell again, and rose again and fell again. And in some people's eyes, it's destined to rise again and then fall again. But leaving, that's, I mean, folks, there are persons who strongly believe that. Yes?
So Zoroaster was in the time of the Persian rule of the
Yeah,
Persian
rule of
Empire?
Persians. Like I said, at one time we thought he lived in the 600s, and it was before, about 50 or so years before Nebuchadnezzar. And now we're trying to put him back to 400 years before that. But I mean, his religion had a firm hold on his people. Now we'll be talking more about religions and their founders. I mean, there was, of course, Zoroaster, the founder of Zoroastrianism. Hinduism, we don't know who the founder was there, but there was Buddhism. His founder, Buddha. Confucianism, its founder, Confucius. Christianity and its founder, Christ. Islam and its founder, Mohammed. Talk about the personal lives of these people. In most cases, and this is true of Jesus, Confucius, and maybe of Zoroaster also, these men were not honored until after they were gone. The Chinese were notorious for killing their religious leaders or sending them into exile, exiling them, killing them even. And then afterwards honoring them. They couldn't honor them enough. The Greeks did the same thing with Socrates, executed him. Then as soon as they'd done it, they started heaping honors upon him, realizing that, hey, maybe we made a mistake. I'll be talking about these men in more detail as time goes on. All right. Any other questions, comments, or let's see. All right, then I want to spend, I've covered chapter 1, so I want to spend the rest of the time reviewing. And by the way, it would benefit you greatly if you would, in your studies, review the lecture notes that you will see for the other morning class also. Now, these morning lecture notes are included on your iCollege page, and the lecture notes I give for this class are included on theirs. But I wind up saying things to you that I don't say to them, and vice versa. I mean, you know, I leave this school every class and think, I didn't say this, I didn't say that. Yeah.
So was Egypt never considered a world power?
Well, now again, you know something, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to start, I did put it in the morning class. Sumer, Egypt was extremely powerful at one time, but their empire only included this territory here and this here, the biggest, and nevertheless, they were the strongest nation in the world during their heyday. So we do sometimes include them as a world power. All right, good question. Anybody else? Okay, by way of review. Dynasties. What happens to a dynasty? Almost every time in history, a dynasty tends to fall. They'll come on the scene, a very powerful man will put on the scene, he'll be followed by someone who wasn't so powerful, and the dynasty will come to an end. Now, I want to say this about modern conquerors. Ancient conquerors would oftentimes build an empire and die ahead of their empire. That can be said for Sargon, for Cyrus, for Alexander, for Julius Caesar, for Genghis Khan. But after Genghis Khan in the modern world, empire builders perish while trying to build their empire. I'm talking about Napoleon. Napoleon was not actually killed, but he was defeated and forced into exile. And Hitler, these men were not able to finish the job of building the empire that they dreamed about. But in the ancient world, a lot of them did. Now, speaking of empires, something I think I really should mention, conquest was looked on as being a virtue until about 120 years ago. And weirdly enough, the nations of Russia and Britain and France and Germany all built their empires, and earlier than that, Spain had built its empire. And then in the late 1898, the United States decided it would get into empire building, and no sooner had the United States conquered the Philippines and Puerto Rico, and that the nations of Europe pointed their finger at you and said, imperialist, you're imperialist. Hey, we're just doing what you've been doing here. No, it's wrong, you're imperialist. And the communists would call us imperialists during the entire time that they were in existence. But, be that as it may, empire building was justified. Now, in the case of the Jews, who conquered part of the land of Canaan, you have to realize that the people in Canaan, the Canaanites, were worshiping Baal, and part of the worship of Baal involved a ritual called temple prostitution, where the young girls would go into the temples and prostitute themselves for money, and this was their way of honoring Baal. And the babies that were born from this prostitution, they would put in ovens and offer them as a sacrifice to Baal. If this sounds gruesome, this was what the Israelis used as justification for the going in and conquering. Now, more recently, folk, Hernando Cortez heard some screams coming from Montezuma's temple, and he asked his interpreter, what's the meaning of these screams? And the interpreter said, oh, these are people being offered up to the sun god. Cortez turned to Montezuma and said, your gods are not gods, but devils. Well, that created some tense moments between the two sides, but then peacemakers moved in on both sides and temporarily smoothed things out. Cortez, as you may know, went on to conquer Montezuma and used as justification their offering of human sacrifice. In today's modern politically correct world, I have asked every class I've taught recently, what would you have done if you had heard a scream from the temple? Modern day political correctness folk has no answer. Well, it actually does. It says, that's their way. And who's to say that one way is better than another? Let them alone. Let them have it. Cortez didn't see it that way. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I do either. But they use this as justification for conquering. And what we're about to find out in the modern world is the people you don't conquer will turn around and conquer you sooner or later. The Chinese found this out, and so did the Romans. And we may be about to find out the same thing. Anybody have any comments? I mean, you're laughing like something I said was funny. I mean, this could get really, really serious if this nation runs into some problems. And I mean, hey, how serious could it get if Iraq, if the Muslim world and the communist world, Russia and China and the Muslim world all unite together against us, and we have no friends to come and help us? And folk, is this unlikely? No, it is not. Yes?
Isn't it kind of already happening though?
That's why I made it point of it. It's already happening, and folk, can we stand up to all of them? That's the issue. We don't know it yet, no. All right. Now, here's one. Again, I don't know if you'll see this one or not. If the air is God, I mean, you know, people who worship many gods will worship the wind, the air. What happens generally to the culture and scientific achievements of people who believe this? They might be proven wrong, but the answer I really want, and I mean, this, yes.
They're not objective.
They what?
They're not objective.
They're not objective. Did you say something? One of somebody said.
Isn't it like they don't grow or something? I remember you
They
talking about
decline. All right, you remember I said, yeah, they tend to decline over time. They start off really, really strong, and then they start worshiping as they start worshiping nature. Now, about the wind being God, folks, I have to say this. The weather is somewhat unpredictable. When I was a child, the weatherman could predict tomorrow's weather 6 times out of 7. Right. But he couldn't predict it always. We said, if we just got satellites into orbit and better computers, well, today we have the satellites galore, and have better computers, and today's weathermen can predict tomorrow's weather right 6 times out of 7. Oh yeah, we can better track hurricanes as they move across. But still, I mean, if you follow the path of a hurricane, you'll find that weathermen say, now, well, it could follow this path, it could follow this one, it could follow this one. We won't know until it moves. So it's not hard to understand, I mean, why the ancients tended to believe that the wind had a mind of its own. I don't say that it does, but we, even with our computers, all the weathermen can do is, well, there's a 60% chance of rain tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow the weatherman is giving us 0% chance. We'll see if that happens. 0% chance on Friday. Well, and then I think on Friday comes up to 10% chance. And then by Saturday up to about 30% chance. And next week, 50 and 60% chance Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, of course, it's more inaccurate the farther out you get, granted. We'll see, though, if that comes to pass. Now, they're often right when it comes to temperatures. If you consider within 5 or 10 degrees, right, they're right. But again, weather science is somewhat hard to predict. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this in this class or not, but very important, the ancients did not separate or compartmentalize science, theology, and politics. To them, it was all one. The politician in today's world might say, well, religiously, I believe this way, but when it comes to politics, I'll do this. They did not make any differentiation between science and politics or religion. All were one and the same. There was therefore no conflict between science and theology. At least in their minds, there was not. This is not true in today's world where that science and theology often come into conflict. Now, all right, folks, I tried hard to emphasize this, and I can't explain why the 2/3 of my classes last spring and last fall missed it. The destruction of the city of Ur. How did the original sources describe it? Well, that's basically, they didn't use the term atomic bomb, but by the description of it, it was a fiery holocaust. Very, very hot, super hot fire that only an atomic bomb likely could make. Super hot fire. And keep in mind, the city was made out of clay. And keep in mind that clay does not burn. Even their writing materials were clay. Yes?
Going back to the last point, last semester I had to do a project on Napoleon.
On what?
On Napoleon.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I heard that the reason, he said politics and religion are one and the same back then.
For that, yes.
Yeah, he said that the reason why Alexander the Great made himself God he was moral or political reason. And so he could say.
Well, keep in mind, a lot of the rulers in those days made themselves God. The Egyptian pharaohs did, and Alexander, by the way, took on the title, when he conquered Egypt, he took on the title of Pharaoh. And also, folks, I have a DVD that documents this. His father peeked in on his mother one night and saw a big, huge serpent slithering up to her bed. Philip went to the oracle at Delphi to find out what the issue was. The oracle at Delphi all but told him, "You're not Alexander's father. Zeus is Alexander's father." Alexander then went to that oracle in Egypt, in the desert sands of Egypt. The oracle told him, "Your father was not Philip. Your father is Zeus." Now, I'm not saying he was, but I am saying Alexander told us that. But you have to explain something, though. Unlike every other general, no, Alexander went into battle with his troops behind him. He was in the front. He was the first person to join the army, and until he got to India, he never was wounded. How was he wounded in India and why? Well, the Indians had weaponry, which we'll talk about in the next chapter, that even could bring him down. He was never the same after being hit by an Indian. All right, officially, folk, you'll read arrow. He was hit by an Indian arrow. Was he actually hit by an Indian guided missile, like some speculators think? All right, but anyway, he could march in front of the battle and leave always victorious, never lost. He claimed he was a god. But then again, so did all the pharaohs. Now, the Sumerian kings did not. A lot of your Roman kings did. Septimius Severus, Roman emperor, as he was dying, he said, "I can feel myself becoming a god." Some people call this megalomania. All right. Hey, folks, you have to understand the mindset of these people we're talking about. All right, you can snicker if you want to. I don't care. No, I don't believe they were God. Now, in the case of Alexander, there's a little bit more to it than that. All the ancients believed that gods had come to earth and cohabited with human females and produced a hybrid race of giants. This you'll find in all of ancient literature, including the Bible, including the Sumerian record. I see some heads nodding that you've heard it from the Bible. Well, Genesis 6, the first chapter, and several other places throughout Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and then the giant Goliath in 1 Samuel, and in Chronicles also. Goliath had 4 brothers whom King David's men brought down. Believe what you will, but be advised or be aware of what the ancients believed. And a lot of it, I mean, hey, in my faculty they tell me it's about you and not about me. Ollie, it's not about me. Perhaps it's about you, but also, folks, it's about these people who have been dead for 3,000 years, because what they did may be about to be repeated. Anyone have a comment? All right. All right, I'll tell you, I got about 2 hours sleep last night. I tried to go to sleep listening to YouTube videos, which helped me sleep, except these were YouTube videos about things that's supposed to happen in this world in the month of September. And I'll leave it at that. Some of you might have some idea of what I was listening to. All right. Go to YouTube and listen for yourself. That there's huge disasters like we haven't seen in generations about to happen. And at the end of September, our economic system as we know it will not be in existence. There might be rioting in the street, bloodshed, war. Yes. And oh yeah, and a big super comment about to hit the ocean and flood out the eastern seaboard. Yeah, that too. Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but hey, supposedly our astronomers know about it, and our president knows about it. All right, but I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Yes.
Well, there have been many people throughout history who have said the world is going to end
Yeah,
May
indeed.
12, 2012 or whatever.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the first time I heard it was in 1961, February 5th, because of an alignment of the planets. Then all the planets got on one side of the sun in 1981. They did, but nothing happened. There have been predictions made that the world's going to end at a certain time, and this will probably blow over like the others have. But anyway, all right. Well, but some of this, I mean, if you watch the stock market, the big crash was supposed to have occurred in September. It hit a certain rate. And it's worse than it's been in 20 years. And it might not be over yet. All right, we'll move on. Now, there are a couple of open-ended questions. That one of them I've done, and if you make any attempt to answer, I promise I won't take off points for it. I don't know if you'll get this one or not. The question is, how was the big stones that make up the Great Pyramid moved? Basically, I don't care what answer you put down. I really want your opinion. You can put anything you want to. As for me, I don't know. I've had students last spring and last fall put down aliens. Yeah, you can laugh if you want to.
I knew you was things.
And also that our ancestors had technology that we don't have. They used rope, even though they're rope hardly could have moved those stones. They rolled them on logs. There are no forests in Egypt, and haven't been in 10,000 years. It would take a whole forest full of logs. And all right, now the ancients, how did they date their time? I mean, and the Japanese still do this. They dated their time by what? What? Well, they did that, but I mean, for instance, they would say, if they tried to be specific about a certain year, they would say in the third year of what? Not Christ, so that came later. That came around 5 or 6. Yes?
Wasn't it based on the crops? Like,
You're on the right track. They would date their time based on when their king began to reign. In the third year of King Tutankhamun, or in the 5th year of King Akhenaten. Now, speaking of Egyptian pharaohs, there was one of them I don't know if I've mentioned, King Tutankhamun, King Tut we call him. King Tut is unique because unlike the other kings, his tomb was lost for some 3,000 years, and when we found it, it had never been plundered. He had all of his wealth that had been buried with him was right there, and we dug his body up. Doctors examined his body thoroughly, and we learned that he was probably a very, very sickly man who only lived to be about 21 years old, and likely died violently because he had a severe wound to part of his body that would kill a man. So he likely died violently, and likely again was highly sickly, but he was buried with a whole lot of wealth. His body has been sent all over the globe, and his body actually spent some time here in Atlanta in the Civic Center. Regrettably, I did not go see it. I mean, I'm fairly busy, and it's difficult for me to take 5 or 6 hours from my schedule to go down to the Civic Center. So I didn't see it. The only exhibit for the Civic Center I ever went to see was the Titanic exhibit that they had on display here several years back, about 10 years or so ago. But the other ones I haven't. But King Tut, he's known as. All right. Hopefully you all know the difference between monotheism and polytheism. All right, a lot of these civilizations were located along the banks of rivers. Which river is the river of Egypt? The Nile, the river of the Sumerians. Two of them. Tigris and Euphrates, yes. When these two rivers join, what's left, I believe, is called the Euphrates still. The Euphrates is a little bit bigger than Tigris. These two rivers joined together before they emptied in the Persian Gulf. When I was a kid, they taught us that centuries ago the rivers did not join, but today we say yes, they always have, at least in recorded history. This area right here has a special name, the cradle of civilization. What's this area called in it's shaped like a partial moon before it becomes Fertile Crescent. Yeah, the crescent. The Fertile Crescent.
What exactly is the Fertile Crescent?
It's simply a crescent shape. What it means that this area here can be farmed easily, owing to the fact that unlike all this region here that's difficult to farm because it's dry, this is one big vast desert. The Sahara is the world's largest desert. Egypt would be desert if it were not for the Nile. But right in here is a fertile area, and this is the cradle of civilization, like Fertile Crescent. That includes Israel and Lebanon and goes here. Somehow they managed to get some rainfall here, and any weatherman might know why. Well, this area here just simply, and this area here just doesn't get any. This area does. And again, some weatherman might know more about why than I do. All right. Now, when I talk about Y chromosome DNA, what is Y chromosome DNA? What's that? It's the opposite of mitochondrial, and Y chromosome DNA is male, father to son. Mitochondrial DNA, mother to daughter. Now, there have been times when we have recently observed, there are a few exceptions, that sometimes the mother passes on Y chromosome DNA. We don't know how that happens. So it does seem to happen on occasion. Know the names Inanna and Merkar, Lugalbanda. Inanna was a woman, and Merkar carried on a big fight with Harada in order to get gold for the temple that he wanted to build in Uruk. And he had stolen the king of Harada's wife, namely Inanna, and Inanna urged him on. We're going to talk more about this when we come to chapter 2, I promise you. Yes?
What were the three names again?
In Merkar, Inanna, and Lugalbanda. Lugalbanda was been part of Merkar's army. He took sick. When he took sick, he was put in a cave, and he passed out for a while, woke up and prayed to the gods, and the gods came and visited him. He said he could sense the evil about him, though, and their hatred for mankind. But nevertheless, they made him well. Then, while he was recovering, he befriended a baby Anzu bird. The Anzu bird's mother came looking for the baby, and when she realized that Lugalbanda had befriended the bird, the mother Anzu bird gave Lugalbanda the gift of super speed, with which he was able to rejoin the army real fast, and then get a message back to Uruk 1,000 miles away really fast, and then carry the message back from Inanna to. Inanna gave him the secret of how that he could conquer the city of Harada. All right. Yes.
So what about Gilgamesh?
Now, I'm glad you asked that. In the king list, Sumerian king list, And Merikar was not the first, but second king, and then Lugalbanda, the first king of Uruk. My memory fails me here. I don't know. These kings were looked on as being god kings, half god and half mortal. Kish may have been the first one. Then in Merikar, then Lugalbanda, and then Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the last of the god kings. After Gilgamesh, mortals took over the throne. Gilgamesh was 2/3 god. In other words, his father was said to be a demon, a mystical demon, and his mother was at least 3/5 god and 5/8 god, 5/8 god and 1/8 mortal. So put the two together and you get Gilgamesh being 2/3 god and 1/3 mortal. But nevertheless, because he was 1/3 mortal, he had to die. And that upset him greatly because his friend Enkidu had died. So he went and looked for a survivor of the flood. Survivor of the flood told him that there's nothing I can do for you. The gods gave me the gift of immortality, but I cannot give it to you. Gilgamesh went home and contented himself with being the ruler of Uruk, and then died after ruling for 120 years. This story you'll find a little bit off, but in the meantime, he gave us the story of the flood. The story of the flood contains a lot of similarities to the biblical story, and the survivor sent out a dove, and the dove returned. But there's one big difference. The ark was in the shape of a cube, and the cubical ark would just circle round and round and round and get fat, and it made the people inside dizzy, as well as the animals dizzy. So basically, that's an engineering impossibility. All right, the flood brings us up to the next point. The flood story, stories about giants, stories about the zodiac, the 7-day-a-week dragon stories are told by whom? Everybody, all over the world. The American Indians had lots of dragon stories. In medieval folklore, Arthur killed a dragon, St. George killed a dragon. And the dragons have a remarkable resemblance to dinosaurs. We'll move on. Yes?
What does the Y chromosome have to do with what we're studying?
Okay. I think a lot. It's not in your book, but it shows that all human males are descended from one man. To me, that's extremely important. And the Y chromosome is much younger. In other words, basically, that human males are more closely related than human females. And again, if you know your story of the flood, everybody died in the flood except for one man and his sons, and his wife and their sons' wives. Apparently, the wives were not sisters. The sons were the males were father and 3 sons, which would explain why that there was an Adam long after the first Adam, who was Eve's husband. There had been another Adam later. If you follow the logic. Maybe that's Eve, you don't. But since you have Eve's husband would have been called Adam, then several generations later there would have been a flood. And everybody perished except for one man and his sons and their wives. Their wives were not sisters. So that may explain why that the Y chromosome is more recent than the... But what is important to me is that all human females descend from one woman, all human males descend from one man. Yes?
I read somewhere that women were the first humans, and then way back when we produced asexually, that's possibly how.
Say again louder.
Okay, I read one place that women were the only
Human?
species and reproduced asexually, and that's possibly how the Y chromosome would be passed from mother to son.
This is new to me. I can't comment on it. It's news to me. There are some species of plant and animal that do have that kind of reproduction. Mammals, high-level mammals, rarely. Fish are known to be able to change genders. I don't know if you've heard that or not. And reptiles sometimes will reproduce without a male being around. Yeah.
I've also, the same article also said that it's possible that women today can still do that, due to something in our bone marrow.
Now that might be possible. All right, there's a whole lot of things that's going on. You brought up some other issue which I'll bring to the front about a minute. Yeah.
You said that humans kind of degenerated throughout the time.
What's that?
You said humans kind of degenerated
degenerated throughout time, like.
I
lost
strongly
time
believe that.
strength. Is it because of all the inbreeding, maybe?
Very, very, very good observer. All right, well, now you brought up something else, which I'll get to first. I'll get to yours. But the average human European male, according to the armor we find, so in Europe, in the Middle Ages, the average man was about 4'6" tall, which was why that he could get on a horse. Now, what made modern humans so big? All right, basically because we are marrying over the horizon. And particularly, a group of Europeans came to the Americans, and Swede married German, and Britisher married French, and Spanish married sometimes American Indian, and the result was their offspring were better than either parent. You know, it makes sense. The inbreeding. Now, the Europeans, I mean, they generally did not marry their sisters, but they married within their village, and by the time they married someone, well, on my father's side, I'm related a third cousin, on my mother's side, fourth cousin, then go on back, they had so many common ancestors, they might as well be marrying their sisters. Yeah, now, which brings up to something else. This is not be sensitive, but in no way, folks, do I intend this to be anything but a compliment. One reason why that so many African Americans make pro football and pro basketball teams is when they came to America, their ancestors were more diverse than the ancestry of Europeans. Now, again, just the stating of fact. This is not the way it should be. We consider a person black if they have any black at all in their genetic makeup. Barack Obama had a white mother, but he's considered a black man. That's just one example. But, all right, anyway, that's enough. I said about enough I need to say about that. But again, if you look at our pro football teams, most of the players, and again, look at black people in Africa, a lot of them are tiny. Bring them to America, mix them with distant relatives over the horizon. And then also, your Japanese and Chinese, they're getting bigger. It's not because of a better diet. It's because they are marrying strangers. I mean, hey, my parents were strangers. I mean, nobody in their kith and kin ever heard of each other. I married a stranger. Nobody in my kith or kin and nobody in her kith or kin, we never heard of each other. Most of us, we prefer marrying strangers. And that's good for our genes. Maybe not always good for us socially. All right, good question. Now, the other thing, folks, about DNA. Some of you may be aware of this. For the last 50 years, there have been scientific experiments where that we are breeding human DNA with animal DNA. Some of you look like you have heard of this. It's been going on 50 years. But in recent years, it's become far more commonplace, and the laws of some countries say that these creatures of the form are supposed to be killed. In some cases, rumor has it they are not being, and we're breeding a race of hybrids. All right, now, what does this have to do with ancient history? Why did the Egyptians feature humans with human bodies and cat heads? Why did they feature human bodies and falcon heads? Did they master the secret of crossbreeding between the species? All right, you got a comment.
So you're saying that there are humans?
Say it loud.
So you're saying that there's humans with like bird heads?
This is supposedly going on, and some of you may have heard about it. Yes, it may sound fantastic and fetched, but we're learning how it's done and getting better and better at it all the time. Yes.
So Boston and Anubis were.
What's that?
So Boston and Anubis were hybrids.
The what?
Boston and Anubis.
Yeah. Cyclops. I mean, centaurs. I mean, the ancient literature is filled with, among other stories of part beast and part human. Centaur, part human. Harry Potter's were featured centaurs. All right, I mean, again, the Greeks actually believed that they existed and even described encounters with them and gave some of their characteristics and so on and so forth. I'm not saying they did that they didn't, but they believe this stuff to be serious history and not just mythology and folklore. All right. Anyway, I'm glad you brought it up, even if it is far out and strange. Folks, anyway, I'm not going to apologize. I mean, these ancient peoples had some practices and customs that we today do not understand, that we today are going to insist is impossible. or could not have happened, and yet we are on the verge of doing the very thing that they possibly did. There's really not much more I can say about it, folks. All right, moving on. If you don't have written records, you can use DNA to try to reconstruct history, languages, but there's another, anthropology. But what's another feature that a lot of times historians use to try to find out ancient peoples? I mentioned it the first class, I think I did. Archaeology. Archaeology is where you dig. Now, why do you have to dig? Simply because of the way the ancients lived. They lived in their cities, and they would throw the garbage out in the street. They would bury the dead animals out in the street a lot of times, throw the animal waste and human waste out in the street, and after a while the street level started to rise. After a while the street level rose so high that it mostly covered up the old homes. Then the parents would die and a new generation would come up, and they would build a new house on top of the old. Then a new generation would come and they would build a new house. And after a while what you have is what the Bible calls heaps. Scientists call them mounds, the Arabs call them tells. The artificially created mounds. And when our today's archaeologists go into them and say, hey, we can dig down. And you dig, and you come to one of the top layer is the most recent. Then you dig farther down and dig to a lower level, and you get an older layer, and dig farther down. And of course, in a lot of cases, we find that the oldest layers had better built brick, better built home, better constructed homes, and better built pottery and paints than the later layers, indicating a decline over time instead of a rising over time. But archaeology, you have to dig, and we name the periods. There's the Jimdit-Nasr period, the Ur-2 period, the Ur-3 period, the Ur-1 period, the Uruk period, so on and so forth. Again, archaeology. All right, moving on. Who was King David? King of Israel. King of Israel. Again, now, folk, if you see King David on the test and you put King of Israel, I'll give you 3 points. So, speaking of 3 points, there's 28 questions, 3 points apiece. 28 times 3 is 87. That means you're all going to be like spotted 13 points just for taking the test. Yes?
How were your tests set up?
Simply, I mean, if this is not all over. This one is, I just simply put a word down like King David, and I expect you to write. Just, I don't expect you to write the whole paragraph. I'm just writing, if you say he was king of Israel. Now, if you say he was king of Babylon, I have to take the point off. Or if you say he was a religious founder, I'd have to take the point off there too. Well, I might decide to keep that because he had a lot to say about religion. He wrote the Psalms, most of them. All right. Now, who was Solomon? He was preacher, yes, he was a preacher. King of Israel also. But in the book of Ecclesiastes, he called himself a preacher. All right, I'll count that right. Yes?
Can we talk about King David?
Can you what?
Talk about King David?
Okay, you're going to have to speak a little louder. I'm sorry.
Can we talk about King David?
You said in the biblical way.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Like saying,
Those of you who know anything about Bible history, yes.
You can talk to Matmos.
You can say that. But really, all I expect is put just the briefest answer you can, because I have to do this. It's not like the machine you grade. I have to read them and grade it by hand. So if you want to write about King David and write a whole paragraph, I mean, all you're going to get for it is 3 points. But if you just put King of Israel, you get 3 points for that. Yes?
When we say for Solomon that he divided the kingdom of Israel?
He did not divide it. When he passed on, his son was, as so many cases, his son made a big blunder and it split. But he did not divide the kingdom. No, so I have to count off a point for that. But his son made a mistake, and 10 of the 12 tribes went with another king named Rehoboam, and the other half went with Solomon's son. But they went with 10 tribes went with Jeroboam, and the other half went with Solomon's son Rehoboam. And the result was a split that was to last the rest of their time together. All right. Hopefully you know a little about the Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon man. They were ancient men, both of whom had larger bodies than modern man. Hey, as time goes on, we form mutations. And mutations are usually recessive. No, mutations do not lead us to become birds or anything like that. We're still human, but we each have mutations. And again, if you marry too close of kin and you have the same mutation, you can expect your offspring to be small and weak and maybe even feeble-minded. If you marry distant relatives who have different mutations than you do, are very, very distant, you can expect your offspring to be stronger than you are and maybe smarter than you are. All right. Who were the ancestors of the Israelis? There were three of them. Say it. Abraham, excellent. Anybody can think of another two? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob also known as Israel. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. All right. Okay. Among the Indo-European peoples, they also were stone movers and stone builders. What is the most famous stone structure that they built? Stonehenge. It's located where?
Wales.
Wales. Excellent. You said England, I counted right. I told you England. Now, and again, you have the same problem you have when you study the pyramids. How were those stones moved, especially if they were quarried in Ireland, like some people think? We have no answer. All right. Egyptian writing is known as hieroglyphics. Yes, you have a comment over here.
I was gonna ask about the other ones.
Oh, the other rock stone. But actually, I have a book on to describe 10,000 stone structures. But the only one I want to remember right now is the Stonehenge. Now, again, folks, this is a survey course. Now, if you decide to take an advanced course, and this school's about to merge with Georgia State, and you can take 3 to 4 other courses, you would go into much more detail than I'm going into. But anyway, they made lots of them. Yes?
What did you say made the Stonehenge?
The Stonehenge, okay, all these structures were made by, we don't know for sure who. The Druids claim that they did it, and there's no proof that they didn't. So the Stonehenge officially is the property of the Druids. But that doesn't mean they actually built it. Nobody was around at that time who wrote the records, or at least the records have not come down to us. Of 10,000 structures in Europe, stone structures, they've always been there since recorded history, and in every case have one thing in common. Well, two of them. Number one, they're made of stone. Number two, nobody has any idea who built them. They're just there. Some of them are located like deep in a forest, and you come in, all of a sudden you see these stone walls without a roof. The roof must have at one time been made of timbers and since rotted away. Stone has a tendency to crack and crumble, and stone structures simply cannot be restored easily once they start cracking and crumbling. All right. The Egyptian rulers were called by the name of Pharaoh, and yeah, that name made news last spring. Maybe all of you are aware. Pharaoh, American Pharaoh. All right, now, the chief god of Babylon during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. It wasn't Enki, it wasn't Enlil, it wasn't, but it was Marduk. I don't think I mentioned that. Now, see what happened, they started off the Sumerian worshiping Anu. Eventually, Anu faded from power, and Enki and Enlil took over. Eventually, they faded from power, and I've been asked, why did these gods tend to fade from view? We're going to go to visit India and find some of their old gods fading from view also. And the answer is really more theological than I care to get into. But actually, I'll tell you, on a personal, I think the gods quit answering them or quit interacting with them. So they had to find gods that were still around to worship. And eventually, all the gods quit interacting with them. So they made statues trying to hope these gods would make a comeback. This may sound weird. The oracles. The oracle at Delphi in Greece, and then eventually the oracles stopped talking to them. Now, hey, if they had been fake, they could have kept faking it. All right, I'll leave you to ponder that for yourself. But the oracles are known to quit. So after a while, their oracles just fell. The stones crumbled and fell to ruins. I mean, you all know that the stones, when it gets hot, they'll expand. And when it gets colder, after a while, the stone will chip just naturally, and chip, and then start to fall and crumble, and crumble away. All right, but the old gods faded out of use, and we're going to talk in Western history how the Greek and Roman gods gave way to Christianity, and part of the reason was those old gods seemed to have gone silent on them after a while. Would no longer talk to humankind. All right. Oh yeah, the Egyptian word for soul is Ka. The Ka was depicted in the shape of a falcon. Again, the Egyptian had a really strong fascination for two kinds of animals, falcons and cats. All right, now the word myth. I don't think I've talked about that much this time. Now, elaborate. Now, the word myth generally means a story about man's origins that involves gods of a sort. The story of Gilgamesh is generally considered legend. Even though Gilgamesh involves gods, myths are stories about gods creating, making the heavens and the earth. Those are myths. Legends are stories about heroes. Sometimes they were half god and half human. Heroes who did great exploits and great deeds. Hercules, who choked to death two very venomous large snakes when he was in his crib. These stories are called legends. And Hercules, who diverted the course of the river to clean out a bunch of stables that nobody had cleaned in generations. Have you ever heard these stories by any chance? One of you nodding your head, you have, yeah. But he realized he couldn't do it, and all of a sudden he heard a bird singing. If Hercules only knew he could divert the course of this river and wash out the stables in no time flat, so he diverted the course of the river. Again, these superhuman feats are called legends. There is another word called tradition. Tradition are oral stories passed down from generation to generation. And if you study genealogy, you'll find that your families might have a lot of stories that nobody has ever written down, but stories of oral traditions where the father told his son and the son told his son, handed down from generation to generation. And these are called traditions. The story of the Vikings coming to the New World was a tradition for many years. And nobody knew whether to believe it or not. Then finally we found that there were Viking artifacts in a Viking village in Nova Scotia. And we found another Viking village in Greenland. And we'll have the Vikings indeed were here. So it's now considered serious history. The Vikings came here 500 years, almost 500 years before Columbus. Who is credited with being the first users of iron? The Hittites. The Assyrians also used iron. Throughout history, there have been people who have developed a better weaponry, or a better military formation, or better bows and arrows, particularly when the English invented the longbow that could shoot farther than a French bow to help the English win their battles during the 100 Years' War. They also began to use the crossbow, and the crossbow had to be use a lever to get it cocked. And then when it shot arrows really, really, really hard at the enemy. And crossbows are still used. Some of you might have some idea what I'm talking about. The longbow, I don't know if it's used much or not, but there are people who make a hobby out of archery. Anyway, people who develop better weaponry than their enemies will oftentimes be able to conquer their enemies. Semitic has to do with what? Semitic peoples were the Jews were, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, possibly the Sumerians. The Phoenicians at least spoke a Semitic language. These were Semitic people. The Arabs, the Iraqis, these people here are Semitic still today, and they're aware of it. It has to do with being descended, supposedly descended from Shem, the son of Noah. Let's see. All right, according to your authors, mankind is said to have originated on which continent? Africa. Now, folks, this is the hard one. I don't know if we do or not, but actually I don't mean to be. This is extremely important. Name as many things as you can that people must have in order for them to be considered civilized. They need a language. Well, that everybody has that. I mean, that's nothing. Uncivilized people have languages. Yes. Writing. One thing. Writing.
A hierarchy or like?
Hierarchy. Excellent. A hierarchy. That's what the word civil really means. Have a king at the top or government at the top, and then government servants below the king and government below layers below that. That's a hierarchy. Layers below them. And you have another thing. Diversification of occupation. Persons who can make shoes better than everybody else become cobblers. And a lot of times your tanner cannot make good shoes. He can tan the leather but can't make good shoes. So the tanner will sell his tan leather to the cobbler. The cobbler forming his shoes, and the cobbler will buy his food from the farmer and trade him for shoes. But oftentimes, instead of trading by barter, money is involved. But you get better quality workmanship when each person learns to make one thing and one thing only and make it right. I mean, I was talking about making some of my daughter asked me to make a box for her, a wooden box. So that's easy. But folk, it turned out to be really difficult because I could not square up the sides easily. I mean, there's one thing that, hey, man, this is the bottom, this is one side, this is another. And then when I got together, I found the sides wouldn't square up. I'm thinking if I had to do over again, I could do it better. But again, folk, just putting together a box, it's so easy for the man who does it all the time, and so difficult for a man who hasn't done it once in his life. Many years ago, he got together a box, using some of Dad's lumber. But then trying to put one for my daughter, and it wound up a little bit like a rhombus shape, if you know what I mean. Just a little bit less than square. And had a difficult time getting the lid on. Eventually, I'll square it up before we get the lid on. My daughter grabbed it and painted it up real good, made it look pretty, and she still has it. But I had to do it over again. Anyway, you have to have diversification. And you have to have, folk, I almost hate to say that, the key has to have an army. Warfare is a big part of man's history, and we're finding out today why wars are necessary. Between the wars, I mean, World War I was so terrible. I have to say, World War was so that people got together that we must never have another war. They outlawed war, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, and the Jewish people were most notorious for saying, we're going to never, ever fight any other war again. The Jewish rabbis would teach pacifism. Then millions of Jews got thrown screaming alive into ovens. And today, I've been told the Jewish rabbis do not teach pacifism anymore. Now, if you know any different, you're welcome to say so. Today, the Jews are some of the best fighters on the face of the earth. And when Kuwait was taken up with Saddam Hussein, one Kuwait man said, I'll even fight beside a Jew to get my country back. Well, if he fights beside a Jew, he has a good chance to win. They make excellent fighters. They got cured with pacifism. This is what people will do to you, folk, if you don't stand up for yourself and fight. And right now, I'm talking about this country has enemies who would come in this minute and take everything we have from us. There's only one reason they don't. Why is it? We have, why don't our enemies come in and take it from us? We have the Army, the United States Army. Now we can criticize all we want to, we can knock them all we want to, but they're the only reason, the only thing that stands between us and being enslaved. All mankind is too civilized to enslave other people. You have another thought coming from. Morality has not improved from ancient times. We just simply think it has. We used to debate that when I was in graduate school. Oh yeah, morality is getting better. But our teacher said when we saw the gas chambers, the Holocaust in World War II, and the carnage of World War I, people began to think, hey, morality is not improving. Now we see the 6th century coming to the 21st century. Talking about ISIS now, for you know. They're bringing the 6th century to the 21st, and all of a sudden we realize, hey, we have to fight for the same reasons our ancestors did. It's either that or, well, be thrown alive, kicking and screaming in the ovens, or be carried off captive to a foreign land. It's that simple. So civilized people must have an army, must have a government, must have writing, must have, and yes, one person in the morning class said religion. I pretty much say they all have had, except for a few. The communists have tried to do without it, with the results that millions of people starved to death.